Alien Romulus is quite the adrenaline ride. I was getting a little bit worried that I was overhyping myself, as this movie has slowly become my most anticipated movie of the summer, and us Alien fans have been through a roller coaster of quality with this franchise. But I had so much fun watching Alien Romulus last night. I can't wait for you guys to see it. Fede Alvarez takes us back to space where no one can hear you scream, and his passion for this film series is obvious. He promised to bring it back to its roots, and he delivered. The movie leans heavily into its horror elements, and what we get is an intense, thrilling, cinematic sci-fi horror film that fits right in with the best entries in the franchise. The story is focused on a group of young colonizers who are desperate to escape their current circumstances and decide to go scavenging the deep ends of what they think is a decommissioned spaceship, only to come face to face with the most terrifying life form in the universe.
Perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility.
When I tell you that I was stressed watching this movie, I mean I was at the edge of my seat, locked in to the point that the few well-placed jump scares that I probably should have seen coming 100% got me. And I don't even like jump scares, but those were not the cheap false scares you usually see in horror movies. Those were actually well executed. Tension and pacing really work here. Fede Alvarez really knows how to build things up effectively. You get that opening all Alien fans will know so well that starts with silence and the ship waking up as the movie begins to come to life, warming up as the events start unfolding. It's never slow, but it eases you in. There's this constant feeling of acceleration when it comes to the pacing and the intensity building, the situation getting more and more dire, the action ramping up, and by the time you're in the third act, things have really escalated into chaos. The story and the visuals do owe a lot to the franchise, to the original Alien of course, but also to the rest of the movies. You will see a lot of familiar things, particularly in the first half of the film, which can make it feel a little predictable. I actually didn't expect to see this many of the Alien greatest hits in this movie. Those things are definitely there for the fans and as a love letter to the other films, but it's the execution that really elevates the familiar beats here, the spin that Fede Alvarez puts on all of these iconic elements. And Alien Romulus does have its own original ideas to contribute to this terrifying sci-fi universe. There are some tie-ins that I think are going to be divisive though. I'm not going to say exactly what they are, but this has to do with the prequels, which can be a point of contention for the fans. I personally think this was used sparingly and well, but I do wonder if some people will just completely reject the idea. That being said, you can watch this movie without having any previous knowledge of the other Alien films. You'll miss the references, but the story stands on its own without relying on the viewer doing any kind of homework. But also just watch at least the first two, Alien and Aliens, if you haven't for some reason. Not because you have to, but because they are both masterpieces and simply amazing, thrilling sci-fi horror films. Easily among my all-time favorites. As far as the balance of action and horror goes, Alien Romulus ends up somewhere between Alien and Aliens. There's definitely some exciting action involved, but it's still very heavily leaning into horror and atmosphere. And then the third act gets crazy as the movie progresses into its most original territory. And while I do think there is a chance this part might be a little too weird for some people, for me, it was weird in a good way. Plus, it was refreshing to see after we covered some of those familiar things in the first half of the movie, like the face huggers, the chest burster, direct visual and character callbacks. You know the drill if you've seen other Alien movies. Speaking of characters, I've seen a lot of concerns about the film featuring a younger cast and this idea of teenagers in space ruining the franchise. First of all, they're clearly clearly not teenagers. They are younger, they come off as young adults in their early 20s. But second, and more importantly, this younger cast works. We get a little bit of setup, just enough to make us care and get the feel for who these people are, particularly when it comes to the lead, Rain, played by Kaylee Spaney. You understand the dynamic within this group, their relationships, and the younger age plays into that. It also gives them a reason to be a little more chaotic, a little more reckless, and we immediately get the sense that they're walking into something they have no idea about, that they're about to be in way over their heads. Kaylee Spaney as Rain is great, and this was the perfect character for her. I also love that she is very clearly not Ripley, because it would have been a mistake to try to replicate Sigourney Weaver's iconic character. Rain stands distinctly on her own, and while you see some of Ripley's fire in her in certain scenes, she is very much her own person, and I found it easy to root for her. The standout of the movie, though, is David Johnson as Andy. He is absolutely fantastic, and he really creates an unforgettable, interesting character out of what he's given. I'm being vague here on purpose, but it's so impressive what they were able to achieve in this film with him between the writing and the actor's performance. There is one character, though, the inclusion of whom I thought was completely unnecessary, and this is the biggest flaw of this movie for me, particularly because this involves a very obvious and heavy CGI element. I won't say who it is because this would definitely cross over into spoiler territory, but even though this character plays an important role when it comes to exposition and creating conflict, I just think this could have been achieved differently. This was a bad call, and I wonder if the studio actually pushed for this inclusion as a further tie-in to the franchise, because the visual element of this sticks out like a sore thumb. This very obvious CGI element is in particularly stark contrast to how amazing this film looks, with all of its beautiful practical effects, the gorgeous lived-in production design. I loved the look of Alien Romulus. I love that they brought back the retrofuturistic technology, and how much the design of the ship and the technology and the mining colony that we see in the beginning immediately makes the movie feel like it fits right into the classic world of Alien. We get to see different parts of the space station, which all feel like they served a purpose at one point, and that location really gives the impression of a massive haunted spaceship, which is really cool. Also, the space itself looks beautiful. It usually looks great in movies. I always love those types of shots, but here in particular, there were some breathtaking shots of space, and they're used well within the story. Even the mining colony that we briefly see, which is where our characters are from, looks and feels like a real place. It's a place with zero sunlight. It looks depressing, and you get why these characters are so desperate to get out. And of course, it's an Alien movie that goes for the practical approach, so there are some nasty practical effects, some brutal deaths, some body horror to make you squirm in your seat. It's great, and all of their efforts to bring in the classic visual look and feel of the franchise definitely paid off. Now, as far as the themes and the world building go, the movie does have some of that, but these elements are definitely not the primary focus. You do get the soulless corporation screwing people over aspect of it all. There's no getting away from Weyland-Yutani, but you also get a human versus AI angle that feels fresh and relevant. Obviously, this has been a part of the franchise before, but the way it's explored here is something I really enjoyed, particularly exploring the different attitudes and our relationship with that kind of technology. The film doesn't go too in-depth with any of this, unfortunately. I wish it did. I do love that kind of stuff, but I understand why they didn't want to focus on it. But it's also constantly in the background. It's still part of the movie, so if that's something you're looking for, It's there. Here's the deal. This movie is fun and I had a great time with it. I can't believe this was going to be a direct to streaming release. That is insane. This movie belongs on the big screen. Is it better than Alien or Aliens? No, but this is an impossibly high bar to set, and I did not have that expectation. A movie can be great and exciting without being the best of what the genre has to offer. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do a full Alien franchise ranking, but I have to be honest, I haven't had this much fun with an Alien movie in a while. Returning to horror was definitely the right move. As much as I do enjoy the lore and the world building of Prometheus, I missed this side of Alien. While it does sit firmly on the shoulders of the other films in the series, and some will be tempted to say its many Easter eggs and callbacks are just fan service retreading familiar territory, Alien Romulus finds a balance between serving as a love letter to the franchise and actually bringing something new and intriguing into it. The production design is gorgeous, the practical effects are outstanding, the sound is great, the score is very classic Alien, I loved it. Even the few jump scares work, which is not a thing I will praise often. My biggest issue here really is the very obvious CGI element that just stands out next to how beautifully tactile and practical everything looks, and it just keeps coming back throughout the movie. Could they have also cut down on some of these references and callbacks? Yes, but it really didn't bother me all that much here. Fede Alvarez breathed new life into this franchise with Alien Romulus, finding creative ways to use already established iconic elements of these films and to once again make facehuggers and xenomorphs the nightmare fuel they were meant to be, bringing the horror of the sci-fi universe front and center and finishing off with a wild third act. I was stressed, I was anxious, I was at the edge of my seat, I cared what happens to these characters, and it was so good to be back in this terrifying alien world.